Hey class, welcome to Friday. It is Friday. Many of you getting ready for the weekend. Some of us have to work the weekend occasionally, but which I fully understand. But I wanted to take a few minutes here on Friday and say thanks for a job well done in our terrorism course. I remain highly impressed with the work you're doing and all your elements, all your discussions and writings and all your entries. So keep up the great work. Now I'll get your grades to you. Many of you have already noticed that I've graded a lot of papers. I'm finishing those up today and this weekend give them to you certainly by the deadline on Sunday, if not before. But in those comments that I've added to the discussions to your grade, I want you to take a look at those. The first couple of weeks, one of the things I do is I try to be a little bit easy, try to work with you and give you some notes and tips and hints to help you move forward in your discussion, things like spelling and grammar and APA. And I'll continue to do that because I want you to be successful. And as I've mentioned, this course is not one-sided. It's not about you just doing some work and hoping to get a grade to pass the course. Not doing that. We shoot for an A in this class. We don't shoot for C's. I want everyone to get an A. And the way I do this is on the first day of your class, you have an A, and it's yours throughout the entire course, but it's yours to lose. And my goal is to help you keep that A, to keep giving you as much information as possible, to work with you, to give you opportunities and in the discussions and written assignments and give you those tips and hints and try to help you learn. So this isn't about throwing you to the wolves. It's helping you learn not only about terrorism, but any other thing that we identify that needs to be talked about or needs to be worked on. So what are we doing this week? In the discussion, which is really the heart of what we've done this week, in the discussion, we've had an opportunity to take a look at censorship and to discuss whether or not the United States should be censoring some of the groups that are out there, those Al-Qaeda's and ISIS and all those groups that are out there, because we get a lot of information from them. You can go to any website or obviously pick up the newspaper in some places, depending on what's published, and there's magazines and television articles and shortwave messages if you listen to shortwave, or if you're a ham radio operator like me. So there's lots of opportunities to get this information that these groups are sharing out there one way or the other. Now, you can listen to it, or even you hear the news, you watch the news, listen to the news, and these groups are out there sometimes just carrying out attacks so that it gets picked up by the mainstream media. Now, the thing we don't see very often is, how many times do we see this public information officer that stands at the podium, and he stands with this unified command, and they make this announcement: yes, we carried out this attack against X, and here's what we did, and here's how we did it, and why we did it, and America's the great Satan. You don't see that so much as, because they'd be obviously arrested, they'd be taken into custody or even killed by our government or some other government. So they don't do that. They remain hidden, whether that's on the public streets or, in a cave or whatever the case may be. Most of the time they're out in the open and we don't even know who they are, or the government pays close attention to them and lets them go about their daily lives, which brings us back to our discussion. Should we censor or should we not censor? So in our discussions this week, we've had both. The majority of you have stated in the discussions that you don't believe in censorship because once our government gets into censoring something, then it's the domino effect, and then everything else becomes censored. Others have stated in the discussions that we shouldn't censor because it gives us an opportunity to keep up with these groups, to see what they're doing, to watch them, to try to have an understanding. Now, we talked a little bit about analytics in some of the discussions last night. Thursday, I posted a little bit. And so one of the questions I posed to you, is it possible to use analytics to try to predict what these groups are doing? There's Google Analytics, there's lots of things out there. Is it possible to do that, to follow what they're doing on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and all these other things that are way beyond me. Yes, many of you laughed, I'm sure. So, yes, I think we can use it in analytics. And what I'd encourage you to do is take a look and do a little research on analytics and social media and terrorism and see what you can find and put that together, maybe in a discussion or a paper or a journal entry or something like that. But this discussion keeps going, even in the public. We mentioned that in the discussions, what's going on out there? Is people really scared? Are they not scared? Do they kind of take this with a grain of salt? I mentioned that in the discussion. Does the average American take some of this information that's put out by groups that we don't censor, and they consider it to be a grain of salt or in fodder in most cases, and they just listen to it, they're aware of it, but it doesn't change their daily lives? Now, some of you have agreed with that, and others have said, no, it really does scare people. People are concerned more than they were before. People, after 9/11, especially the older group, the Generation Xers and before, the baby boomers are concerned about, pardon me, are concerned about that. It's affected our economy. It affects the things that we do. And then this domestic terrorism and the shootings that we've seen here locally, that affects everything we do. So in defining terrorism, that fear, that sense of terror that's out there really has worked, as many of you stated in the discussion. So anyway, great discussion, but it continues to be everywhere. I picked up the paper this morning, and there was a discussion about the United States and our role in fighting ISIS and the things that we see with Russia, who's now getting involved. And so, it's out there everywhere. Everyone's concerned. It's in the paper daily. I think in our statewide paper here in Arkansas, which is a pretty good paper, by the way, I counted about 12 articles just in today's paper in different sections that relates to the groups that we're discussing in our class here in terrorism. So it's out there. It's on the first section, the A section, the B section, and we're even having something in our little 3-page business section that discusses terrorism and the effects that terrorism are having. So it's out there, and that's one of the reasons we included our discussion about censorship this week. Should we censor? Should we not censor? They censor in the UK, as many of you have mentioned, and it works quite well. But we don't censor in the United States. You can look at the tweets, you can look at YouTube, all those sorts of things. And they have these groups have a real good recruiting effort here in the United States with getting young females and young men to come join the efforts. And we'll never see them again once they get there. They're there. It's doubtful that they would ever return. So great job on your discussions. Don't forget your other entries, your journals, your written assignments. It's Friday. I want you to take the weekend and don't just give up your weekend. I want you to enjoy life some, but I want you to pay attention to those things I've posted about checking your writing, checking your grammar, and including those citations in the discussions. In APA. And what's the purpose of us doing that? The purpose of us doing that, requiring it, is not only just to cite, to give that credit to someone for their effort, for what they've done, but really to prepare you for a job. If you're going to work in Homeland Security, if you're going to work in emergency management, if you're going to work in law enforcement or corrections or anything that you do, it's important that you have the ability, develop the ability to write a report effectively. And in doing that, you need to be able to be detailed. I can assure you from my career that I've had to write detailed plans and procedures and reports. Sometimes you're called to testify on those years later, even after retirement. And so you need to have detailed reports. So again, citations not only help you, we're not only crediting the author, but what we're doing is we're learning how to offer detailed reports and present those and write well. I'd encourage you to do that. Don't take those shortcuts. Please don't do those 1 or 2 liners. Do those extended, in-depth discussions and journal entries In written papers, don't take the shortcuts. If you're taking the shortcuts today, you're going to take the shortcuts tomorrow, and you're not going to shine, and you're going to have some difficulties. And I don't want you to do that. I want you to have that A, to maintain that A that you have today. I want you to learn how to write. I want you to learn how to research. And by all means, I want you to learn about what we're doing in terrorism and understand these organizations. I assure you that whatever role you're doing, I've had students come back to me years later and say, hey, you know, Professor Brown, several years ago I took your class. Today I'm a law enforcement officer and I work in this certain metropolitan city, and I was asked to be part of the terrorism task force and put together some information for our department in a training session on terrorism. And he said it clicked, the things that I learned in your class, the information you presented. I thought about APA and everything that you taught us, and I was able to present and got a standing ovation on what I had learned in the class. And that's exactly what I want for you. It's not about me, it's about you. That's exactly the reasons I try to share this information with you and try to work with you and post those discussions and give you that detailed feedback as much as possible in your grading so that you learn from it. Not just to give you information, but so that you read it and take something back and you learn from it when you're in your next assignment, and you put the rubric and the instructions next to each other and you follow those and you keep that A, and so that you learn and you come back in your career someday and you can send an email and say, hey, guess what? I picked up what you taught me. I picked up what I learned in the course and I used it in my career, and part of that helped me to get promoted or to get a citation. It's about you. It's not about me. I really want you to excel and do well, and that's why I push you to do the best you can. So it's Friday. Thanks again for all the hard work you're doing. Like I said, we have an excellent class. There's not a student in this class. There's not any one of you in this class that's not doing well and that's not excelling, because I know you're doing great. I see it in your discussions. I'm reading those discussions. I'm participating in those. I see it. So keep up the great work. Now, if you ever have any questions, please let me know. I ask that you take a look at the announcements area. I have tips and hints in there, and I want you to look at those often. Get that information that's in there. So have a great weekend. I'll continue to grade your papers. Pick up the newspaper and see what's going on in the world today. Put that in your discussions. And if you need me, reach out to me via email, via text messaging, via phone. I'm always here for you day or night. If you work the midnight shift and you're on a time zone that's different from mine, if you're serving in the military and you're on a ship somewhere or at a duty station, and the only time you can meet with me is at your 3 in the morning and my noon, I want you to let me know. If it's my 3 in the morning and your noon, I don't care. Let me know. I will be here for you. I've done it in the past. So do it again. I used to meet with a student in Italy all the time who's in the Navy. So if you need my assistance, let me know, and I'll do everything I can to help you. Y'all guys have a great weekend and keep up the great job you're doing in our terrorism class.